and welcome back to What's Up WID, the World Institute on Disability podcast, where we discuss what's up in the global disability community. If you're new here, I'm your host, Ashley Nkumsa, and today I'm so excited to be joined by Lorrell Kilpatrick, who serves on WID's board of directors and is an incredible disability justice activist whose work focuses on the intersections of race and disability and Black disabled liberation. She's currently the Advocacy Services Coordinator at Everybody Counts, which is a center for independent living in Indiana. Lorrell, how are you doing today?
Oh, I am doing great. How are you? I'm so happy to be here.
I'm doing fabulous as well. We were talking offline about how much I've just been so anticipating having you on the podcast, so I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the invite.
So could you tell us a little bit about your background and your activism work pertaining to the intersections of racism and ableism?
Oh, sure. Well, my gosh, I'm from Northwest Indiana, which could mean anything. I originally am from a city called East Chicago, Indiana, and that's the name. We are directly east of the border in Indiana and Illinois that separates Chicago from the city that I live in. Just like most neighborhoods in the Midwest, it's a high steel and industrial production area, which means it's a high pollution area, which means that, in the area where my grandparents lived, they often had to leave their neighborhoods because of all types of outbreaks happening from these factories that surrounded their neighborhoods. And they lived in these factories. They built schools right next to these factories. One group of one half of my grandparents lived right across the street from a very popular gas corporation's factory. Literally, the gas containers were literally just across the street, and that's where they played. So that's the background of that. That's where people worked. And so my activism was sparked because when you live in a situation like that, you got to learn how to speak quite loudly. To be heard, to get any form of just human rights, not to mention civil rights, not to mention gender rights or racial rights or anything like that. Voices had to be very loud for people to be able to live, and so that's what I saw coming up. That's what I was raised to believe was the way that people naturally responded, and I definitely recognize how not typical maybe that was for a lot of people, but it just happened to be typical in the area that I'm from.
Yeah. So how did you start exploring that intersection between racism and ableism in your work, professionally speaking?
Oh, well, I acquired a disability when I was young enough, I guess. I was maybe 12, no, maybe 11. My mother, my stepfather, my brother, and I moved from East Chicago, Indiana, to a neighborhood called Ford Heights. Ford Heights in Illinois is a neighborhood in the south suburbs of Chicago. Ford Heights has not had its own police force since probably I was about 10 years old, because that's how corrupt it was, and that's how corrupt it continued to be. The county had to take over the police force when I was a very young age, and I was hit by a car. I was riding my bike home, and I was hit by a car, and I was drugged down a hill under the car, and was alive afterwards. Lived through it, and sustained a few disabilities after that. And, my family always, was very, very particular in, in letting me know that, just because I had to learn how to do things a different way didn't mean that I didn't have to do them. I still had to do things. I still had to know that I was able to do things, and they still had the expectation of me being able to do whatever it is I needed to do to be able to go from day to day. So, it's wonderful. I think it was a life changer when you go through a dramatic experience like that, when one day you're one type of way and the next day you're not that at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's although I guess that's a form, right, of disability activism in terms of my family preparing me for, just because you do things differently doesn't mean there's not going to be an expectation for you to do them. So that started
Mm-hmm.
off quite early. I went to and I lived in this area. The public school system was not good. And so even though we were in this area, we were poor as all heck too. My mother threw us right into Catholic school, Catholic school in the south suburbs and mostly Black and Latin areas in the late 80s was interesting. It was quite interesting. Um,
I bet.
and like living in any project area, once the guns came, once kids started finding bags of guns outside their houses, pretty much, literally bags of guns just sitting there, delivered by somebody, quote unquote. It became dangerous to, we could no longer live there. So the Catholic school system that my mother put us in, we actually lived in a church for a while. We lived in a rectory next to a church, and so that meant that we had to perform labor to stay in that church. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, again, came the responsibility of doing stuff. And when we would go to mass and we would see people kissing all of these statues, all I could think of is, my goodness, I got to clean that later. My God, I hope people don't realize I didn't clean it before. you know so so in terms of moving forward, going to Catholic school, I went to Catholic school from about second grade to I graduated high school. And of course, again, late 80s, early 90s, whole lot of racism. My first activist action was in high school. Somebody wrote a letter to a friend using the N word several times. Happened to have a Black friend also, and they came across the letter. She made dozens of copies of that letter and put them on everybody's locker to show what a racist this person was. And it just happened to be the time of Kwanzaa. My class happened to be, I think I was a sophomore at the time. We just happened to be the largest, the graduating class with the largest number of Black students. And at that point, again, we were sophomores. So you had right there an anti-racist protest at that high school during the week of Kwanzaa. And so that was literally my first physical involvement in activism at that moment. It was very interesting. And the way they hid that girl in school, like she was under attack, was so hilarious. I don't think she had to go to class for like a week. They just hid her in a counselor's office until we had the Kwanzaa ceremony. And they interrupted the ceremony by bringing her there to apologize to everybody. It's about the same, not much has changed.
Exactly. Yeah. Your activism started very, very young.
Yeah, pretty young, yeah.
So we know that in the United States, 50% of people killed by law enforcement are disabled. And
Yes.
more than half of disabled African Americans have been arrested by the time that they turn 28. This is all according to the Center for American Progress. And despite this, though, when we hear news stories about Black people being victims of police violence, disability is often left out of that narrative. Why do you think that this occurs so often?
It's very interesting. I saw a recent Instagram post of a young man talking about uh, when he and his friends were arrested, or at least detained. They were under the age to be actually arrested. They were detained. He called his mother. His mother asked them what they were wearing. And his mother asked them, are they treating you like kids, or are they treating you like adults? And these kids are all under the age of 15. And he said, well, they're treating us like adults. And she said, one or all of you are going to have to pee on yourselves. And he was like, what are you talking about? He said, we got on our nice clothes and our nice shoes. And she said, you're going to have to pee on yourselves, or else they're not going to see you as children. They are going to treat you as adults. And so he told his friends that, and he said all of them peed on themselves. And he said in less than an hour, they were released. That's a very real thing. Because and not because and so what I said was, not, it wasn't that the police felt sorry for them because they peed on themselves. It was, now when this was presented as evidence, it cannot be denied that these are children, because not a whole lot of adults in mass pee on themselves like that. These are children. Now they are being prevented from showing them as guilty adult. Now they have to show them as children, and now they just got to let them go. And so that goes towards the answer to your question. I think there's a whole lot of leaving out disability so people don't feel sorry for folks, quote unquote. Right? So people can't believe that, Well, if this person has this disability or that disability, how is the police saying they did this or that? If somebody is deaf and they don't speak, they only speak American Sign Language, and none of the police did, how can the police said they were a threat of all if all they were doing is speaking in the only way that they can? How can the police defend killing them?
Right.
So of course they leave disability. This is my opinion. Of course they leave disability out. That allows them to more be able to criminalize people.
And the media has so much power in influencing public perception. So when you see that disability is continually being left out of the narrative, it has an influence on the public and how they perceive people's victimhood and who's worthy of victimhood and who is not. Because you see people, particularly with mental health related disabilities, are so often portrayed as a threat. You know, there was just Jordan Neely in New York City, who the media was describing as unhinged and erratic and justifying him being killed. Black people are continually portrayed as threats, and then people with disabilities are also portrayed as threats. So it's doubly just oppressive.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And these things aren't mistakes. These things are tools. I think we all use tools. I would just like to say, I don't know if you've seen the We Can't Breathe, the deaf and disabled margin of police brutality, put out by a couple of really great folks with the National Council on Independent Living. It happened about 6 years ago, where they showed three stories of Black people with disabilities who were, I believe, all murdered by the police. One in custody, one in custody, and two as they interacted with the police. And when these stories were put out, it was nothing about their disability. It was all about the violence that they projected. And it was all about how the police were defending themselves. But as you said, you see this more and more and more. This was a video that was out there 6 years ago. And we continue to see this. We continue to see not just adults with disabilities, but children with disabilities, children in general, number one, but also children with disabilities who are criminalized. How many videos do we have to see in school about teenagers in classrooms who aren't even reacting violently? They're just not doing what the teacher says, and the police comes in. There was one video where police came in and tried to pull a student out of the desk, pulled the desk with the student, flipped them over on the ground. How can that be justified? And under a system that prioritizes control and prioritizes forcing people to obey the system because of the system, it's done quite easily and defended by people until the people become victims, and then they don't defend it. They don't speak against it. They're just silent. But the defense is always very vocal.
And this has been happening for years and years,
decades, centuries.
Exactly, centuries, right? It's only recently that with the emergence of smartphones that people are now catching it on camera, but it was happening long before. Speaking of police violence being caught on camera, in 2020, we saw a global movement for Black lives following the murder of George Floyd. In the summer of 2020, we saw thousands of people taking to the streets to protest injustice. And it's now been 3 years, and it seems like things have gotten quieter, although we have movements like the Stop Cop City movement currently happening in Atlanta. The media doesn't seem to be reporting on this, these movements as much.
We have to look at what the primary function of the media tends to be. The primary function of the media tends to be whatever the source that finances the media says it should be. And sometimes they say it should be elections. Sometimes they say it should be, protests. Sometimes they say it should be a celebration of a much loved holiday by not a whole lot of people, but that doesn't matter. Sometimes they say it should be celebrating the fact that now the banks are closed during Juneteenth. So if you got the day off work, forget you handling your business. Now you just got to stay home, I guess. All of that. The media it puts out whatever those who own it says it should be put out, says should be put out. And that's not always a bad thing, because you have media
Mm-hmm.
sources, uh, you have the Chicago Defender, you have media sources that exist because some things are never put out on quote unquote popular, but what that means is, nationally funded media. So it's not all media
Right.
that does this, but if people are only counting on these major media sources to know what's happening, you're not going to know that much. You have to go outside of those
Right.
sources. And by outside of
Mm-hmm.
those sources, what that means, it'll be great if you actually knew people, and you communicated with people. When those protests were happening, especially here in an area like Northwest Indiana, when George Floyd was murdered, I've never seen. I was involved in groups that led protests that generally happen like that in Gary, in East Chicago, in Hammond, sometimes in Highland, by people from Gary, East Chicago, and Hammond. But when George Floyd was murdered, you had areas like Cherville, Maryville, where people literally were stopping traffic, hitting the streets, and we had never seen anything like that before. Those of us who
No.
who led those types of things was like, oh my gosh. And we
Yep.
had conversations about it, like, should we try to communicate with the people who are leading these? And I remember my response was, no, not at all. That's if this has happened in an arena outside of the people where it's typically happening, it has to develop that way. We can go when the police attack and everybody's very surprised at it. We can help. We can try to communicate in that way to let people know where the safe exits are from the street when the police come crashing through, because that's one of the things that happened too when people who didn't typically protest started doing so. You all of a sudden saw a whole lot of surprise about how the police treat protesters, because it wasn't their experience, right? And that was the
Mm-hmm.
same thing that
Mm-hmm.
happened. That was one of the same things that happened when all of these police murders were going on. When on Twitter, we got a whole lot of advice from activists in Palestine, activists in Pakistan, saying, this is what you want to do when the police hit you with pepper spray, or this is how you want to be sure you can contact each other without it being recorded. It was amazing what was happening. It was like the whole world of protesters were supporting each other, because some people, they
Absolutely.
didn't know what to do, but they knew they couldn't do nothing. They knew they couldn't continue to just
Mm-hmm.
sit silently. And frankly, that's how we all
Mm-hmm.
started. Those of us who do, physically protest, that's how we all started. We don't know what to do, but we know something needs to be done.
Yeah, I'd
And
never seen anything like that before the summer of 2020. I remember literally outside of my apartment, people protesting. Like, I'd never seen that before in my
yeah,
life. And it seemed like we were really on the precipice of something really important. But a lot of looking back at it, it's been 3 years and I've been thinking about it a lot. A lot of the activism that we saw did feel like it was performative, right? And, we had the posting of the black squares across social media. And the question was, how does that move the needle kind of thing? And people were posting all over social media, but now things are different. So how do you think that, like, how do we distinguish between real boots on the ground activism versus performative activism? Because I know some people are well-meaning. A lot of people, allies, are well-meaning, but they just don't know where to begin kind of thing. So
understandable.
do you have any
I did
advice in
a
that regard?
I did a training, and I still do the training, but for the same reason that we don't see so many people out here on the streets. Life happens. It's time to go to work, literally meaning to pay bills. That
Exactly.
happens, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot, a whole lot of teachers and parents were out on these streets, and then the school year started. So in the summer, in some areas, you see an increase of public activity, because the people who see the effects in terms of teachers, um, they're at their second and third jobs now, not their primary job, right? And so that means that you have a little bit more time. But when we all had to go back to work. I mean, if you notice, there's a there's a similarity between when these protests stopped and when people couldn't really take off for getting COVID anymore. You could only take off for about 5 days as opposed to having 2 weeks, right? So there's an overlap of all of those things. And quite honestly, a lot of people who were in the forefront, and I work with the Black Lives Matter collective. Black Lives Matter Gary was formed before the national Black Lives Matter movement took hold. But before, different groups were recognized as chapters. Black Lives, first there was Black Lives Matter Hammond, which started off this Black Lives Matter Northwest Indiana, and then we had an action, and it was amazing, and it was all of these longtime community members, older community members that took a very major street where a lot of trucks go really, really fast. So funny. I'm giving the directions of safety and protest, and they ran past me and went right to the streets. I'm like, oh, okay, we in the street, okay. And then you have Black then you had Black Lives Matter Gary, which formed around the same time, and these neighborhoods are right next to each other, and we kind of came together. So you had the people, and then the founders of the Black Lives Matter national group who went forward, and what happens is what typically happens: money happens. Right. And that's not a bad thing. We all need to live. We all got to pay bills. That happens. Right. But those who have money gave a whole lot of money for these things to be structured, and not on the local level. There are a whole lot of activist groups who no longer even call themselves Black Lives Matter, by the way, because of this issue. Because of the issue of control of the movement. It was no longer a movement by people who were in these neighborhoods, who were in these streets, led by the kids who were homeless. It was no longer that. It became something that people had something to lose from, which may be unavoidable. I don't know. I haven't had that conversation. That may be unavoidable. But when money starts coming from specific entities, it changes it. Your concern becomes about the money. And I can't say all, most BLM groups got some form of financial support with what we're doing. And usually what happens is, you tend to forget how much you were able to do before you got that financial support. And a lot of, and I'm not just talking about Black Lives Matter, any group that holds the name Black Lives Matter, that's any activist group, right? Once you get attention, people do want to support you. And the biggest form of support is either physically showing up. That's the biggest form. And then money. Money is, second or third after that. And then, I mean, we live in a society that runs on money. And so when you get used to being able to pay for stuff, that can, in different times, become the priority. And you can, like I said, you can come back from that. You can come back from that. If you're evaluating what you're able to do, you can come back from it. And so there are still in existence all of these groups that didn't have money, didn't get offered no money, never got any money, but they never came out of those streets either. They're still doing some incredible work. And whether or not groups still call themselves Black Lives Matter or not, they're still doing incredible. There are so many of them who are still doing incredible work. A lot of this work is still happening. It's just that the news broadcasters stop coming. So we may not see it every night, but a lot of this work is still happening. People are still going to city council meetings. People are still holding elected officials accountable. People are still holding school officials accountable. People are still putting together food boxes for folks. People are still raising money so people can pay their electric bills. And because in the summer, they turn electricity off, and in the winter they don't. But in the summer, everybody got their stuff turned off, right? We're dealing with an issue where people are losing their Medicaid left and right and don't even know it yet, and they need assistance. And you still have a large number of groups who are giving that assistance. So the activism, the work has not stopped. The attention just may not be there. And people may not be in the streets, quote unquote, as much as they can because the law actually changed. The law made it okay to run somebody over when they're not doing anything in particular. The law made it perfectly okay to do that.
Absolutely. And, your activism started young. And I think when we think of most of our just leaders in civil rights. Like I think of John Lewis, for example, who I think he was like 18, 19 years old, taken to the streets and protesting and getting beat and brutalized and
arrested, all of that.
Over and over again. How do you think that young people, because I think that young people are the people who have their just finger on the pulse of all of these things. Like how can young people mobilize to fight for Black disabled lives in 2023?
I think that it has to be that they have to know that they are worth fighting for, that they are worth being defended. And we fight for ourselves, we defend ourselves. And we have to know that what we're fighting for ourselves, what we're defending ourselves against, is the same thing that affects other people. So that means that there's somebody else who's doing it too. So we probably want to figure out who they are. And instead of just me doing it here alone, it could be me and this other person doing it. And then you find another person, and then you find another person. That's the benefit of social media. That's one of the benefits of social media anyway, is that you get to see that there are people other than you experiencing these things that you of course think only you experience. Now, the other side of it too is how social media is used to distract us from those things. I mean, how many times, I know I'm not the only one who started watching YouTube videos or started watching Instagram videos and 3 hours later still sitting there with my phone in my hand. That happens quick. That happens real quick, right? And so we I don't know. I think we have to, those of us who are of age, have to prioritize interacting with young folks. I think especially in terms of disability, that's what we talk about all the time here at our center. I work for an organization called an agency called Everybody Counts Incorporated, that are funded to run 2 centers for independent living, Everybody Counts and Everybody Counts North. And we talk about that often. We talk about how the disability rights movement, the historic disability rights movement before it became independent living, how people were so into doing what was actively needed to be done that maybe not enough time was put on organizing young people and teaching them as a culture how important it is to keep up with this work. We see a lot of criticism of young people, a lot, but we were all young. If looking at ourselves, the ages that these kids are now, I'm sure we were into some much more sillier stuff than most of these young folks are. But I think what we have to do is continue to try to reach out to young folks, because these needs ain't the same. I not too long ago, I was at a protest and I was talking to some of the young folks. I was like, hey, if you guys got to run and get away, I'll try to give you time, because I ain't gonna keep up. But what I can do is fall real quick and hold up the folks chasing you. I can do that. We our roles change real quick when these knees start popping. So so I think it's and that's that's humorous in terms of having conversations with young people and making it a priority that they see themselves as being worth fighting for. And we're not always talking about fighting, but people who are worth advocating for. And so if you believe that you are worth advocating for yourself, and you are not a monolith, that there are other people around that are probably going through the same things, that it wouldn't be bad to meet some other folks so you can advocate for each other, so you can build this activism, so you can build this advocacy, so you can normalize supporting other people in what they're going through. And that's how community is built. That's how movements are built. We don't have to wait until things are the worst before we get into what's necessary to do. We don't have to wait at all. So it doesn't, it doesn't, it's not necessary to not do anything, no matter how small, no matter how quiet. Doing it is the primary thing.
And you mentioned that with the disability rights movement that it didn't include enough young people. Another one of the criticisms of the disability rights movement is it was really white, and it didn't include enough people from intersectional identities. So why do you think that it's so important for disability rights organizations today to take on an intersectional approach?
If they want to survive, they have to. And really that's it. If they want to survive, they have to. Or else these people who they're not including are going to shut them down. So you only got one or two choices. If the issues that you're saying are affecting people, then we have to know and we know that there's inequality. I think that's the biggest thing. I think if you can deny inequality, any type of inequality, and the most inequality that's usually denied is racial inequality, but even more than that is social class inequality. And you can't divide the experiences based on race, the experiences based on gender or gender identity, and the experience based on social class. You can't deny that. You can't separate that. So if you're not, if you admit that that's happening, then you know that there's a certain group of people who are experiencing these inequalities to a larger degree. And if there are people experiencing inequalities to that large of a degree, then those are the people that have to be involved. Those are also the people that have to lead it. The video that I was talking about earlier was vocalized by Dustin Gibson and Carrie Gray, who've done and continue to do an amazing amount of work.
Mm-hmm. We've had them both on the podcast, by the way.
Awesome. Yeah. If you don't recognize that the people who are the most brutally affected by the inequality you're speaking against, and bring that group to the leadership because they know what they're doing. This is their daily life experience, surviving this stuff. Then I just don't know where you see the future of your group. I don't know if you see a future of your group. It's difficult.
Yeah, we need the leadership of the most impacted.
Oh my gosh,
for sure.
And it makes so much sense. But again, systemic inequality. Systemic inequality makes people not that everybody has to be purposeful in not seeing it, but it makes people be very used to not seeing it. I teach sociology. I've taught sociology for a very long time. And I remember, I'm not saying that this person had the worst interaction with police that I've ever heard, but in terms of the students that I've dealt with who vocalized it, a very young white woman told an amazing, horrifying story about how a whole police force joined her ex-boyfriend or refused to protect her from her ex-boyfriend, who was a police officer, as he just attacked her family. Literally sat outside the house his whole shift. Her father called the police. The police came, talked to him, tried to get him to leave. He wouldn't. Now he's at work. He's supposed to be somewhere, not outside her house. The police telling her father, well, he's just sitting there. It's okay. He's not doing anything. The father saying he can't terrorize my family like this. I'm willing to defend my family. I have what I have the legal right to have, speaking of a gun. They threatened to arrest her father right there. Right? They were stopped by another police officer who was telling his partner, saying some very, very offensive, sexist things. All these people are white. Everybody involved in this story is white. Saying some very sexist things. The father got offended, started to get out of the car. The cops beat the hell out of him right there in front of his family while making full eye contact with every woman in that car as they beat this man and arrested him for assault. And the student said that she didn't tell this story often, and she said she wouldn't talk about it again in this class because what is she supposed to do? Her parents always taught her to trust the police. So what did that mean for her? And what community could they go to? What organization could they go to based on their political ideology, based on their social ideology? Who could they go to for help? Nowhere, if you're not willing to question the thing that you've always been taught to believe, yet your experience is telling you otherwise. Where do you go? And that's how racism affects everybody. You know, that's not a racism affecting, that's not a racism affecting white people thing. That's racism doing what racism does. That's social class inequality doing what social class inequality does. And then when we tell this story in however many different ways we tell it with people with disabilities, I mean, I've been to protests where I've seen recently where I've seen police snatching people out of their chairs, saying, "Oh, you want to be a protester? You can go to jail like one," snatching them out of their chairs. Right? I was driving the rescue vehicle for people who tried to get away fast enough to not get arrested. You know. And you can't justify that. You can't justify that. And when that happens to you, I can imagine it's horrible. You don't know what to do with that. It goes against everything you've been taught. All the untruths that you've been taught, all that you've been taught to not see. Now you suddenly see it. Where's your community? If you're in a particular group that isolates itself from other people, because of racism, because of ableism, because of classism, because of sexism, because of nationalism, where do you go for support? And the sad truth is they go nowhere. They sit silent. Like my former student, you sit with this silently. You don't tell anybody about it. That was a lot. You got to stop me when I start talking
terrible.
like that. I'll keep going on.
Nope. I'm loving every minute of it. I really am. I'm thinking about, WID is currently celebrating our 40th anniversary, and we're actively talking to the community, to the disability community, various disability communities, because there's not just one, there's several, help us to game plan our next decade and beyond. And I'd love to hear from you. What do you think that we as an organization should be doing to advocate for Black disabled people over the next decade and beyond?
I mean, like a lot of organizations have had to do, you have to recognize that the people who experience this stuff at its most drastic, at its most threatening, have to be in positions of leadership. And that means that you have to take the time, meet them, teach them. As you're teaching them, get their input on what they're learning, get their criticisms, get their self-criticisms, and prepare people to be leading where you want this to go. Because we're only going to be here for a certain time. By we, I mean those of us of a certain age. And all of us have stuff. All of us have stuff. We're talking about a disability population. The system is not geared to keep us here as long as other people. So we got to start replacing ourselves real quick. Replacing ourselves with people who were giving some type of influence and leadership to do what we know needs to be done. But it has to be the people who are experiencing all of these isms that we're fighting against the most. That doesn't mean we ignore other people, but if we're talking about a game plan here, if we're talking about who we're identifying, it's pretty important. I think it's pretty important. Everybody is necessary, and that's not an opposite thing. That's right alongside it. Everybody is necessary, but we do have to know how ableism, racism, sexism in all its forms, we have to know how it's affecting people the most in order to say that what we're doing is for the benefit of everybody. Because if you fix the worst problem, all the other stuff is going to be at least a little bit better. It's going to be at least a little bit better automatically. So, yeah.
Yes, it's important to recognize that all of our collective oppression is wrapped up in white able-bodied supremacy. So when we tackle that, it kind of trickles down to everybody else, for sure.
And when we talk about white, we can't think we're only talking about quote unquote white people, because just like Black people, just like quote unquote Latinos, these are designations given by people who were trying to categorize folks for oppression. We have to realize that when we talk about whiteness, we're not just talking about people's skin tone. We are talking about a political ideology that we're all taught. And so, and that's, I don't get in no fight with nobody. Don't nobody call WID talking about me now. When we talk about that, we have to, I think it's important to identify what we mean by white. And if the only thing you mean by white is less melanated people, that ain't good enough. It ain't good enough, because there are a whole lot of less melanated people. Oh my gosh. I was a part of a turkey drive. Every year we take turkeys to people. And when I cannot say enough, and I'm not saying it's the worst oppression, but for people who the only thing they have to feel good about in terms of themselves is that they're white, how is that not a trick on them? How's that not a trick on them? You ain't got no water. You ain't got no electricity. You're not physically clean. You got addiction after addiction, but damn it, you're white. Not good enough. It's not, it's not good enough. Somebody tricked you into not seeing all of these other things that are going on. So that's the only thing that I say about when we add the word white into a category, we have to make sure that we are talking about all of the agents of whiteness, not just white folks. That ain't enough. We got to talk about whiteness, what whiteness means, and how we are all, subjected to that. Because, a lot of us grow up, we think we have no problems if we were white. No problems whatsoever. Do a turkey drive one year, everybody. Do a turkey drive in lower class areas of your city or your state. My gosh. But it does mean something if you have nothing and you're taught that racism makes you better. I guess. I mean, it don't give you a meal, it don't give you clean water, but maybe it gives you a good feeling. A good feeling ain't good enough to me, but I don't know.
That was so well said. I think, yes, whiteness is we talk so much about it being a something that you can see, but it's something that people want to possess because it equals power and positions you in a certain place in society. So it's so important to understand and to recognize that a lot of people are trying to seek that form of power, even if they are of a different hue. And I'm so glad you pointed that out.
It's interesting. Absolutely. It's interesting. I'm telling you. You can't put me on a podcast. We'll be on here for hours. I'm sorry.
I love every minute of it. Trust me. This conversation has been so amazing. Just talking about the past, the present, the future, all of it. I loved every minute of this conversation, and I'd love to have you back sometime in the future because this was amazing. Thank you so much for being a guest. This was amazing. This is my favorite, I think, podcast that I've recorded this year, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think this is an excellent thing that WID is doing. And I just, and I keep looking forward to I keep looking forward to where WID is going. And I look forward to how there is a purposeful, at least attempt and actions to manifest that attempt to get so many people involved, to get more people involved, to get young people involved, to pull older people back into it. I think that's just as important. It's not too late to get involved in trying to make a difference where you are, around for people who are around you. I don't think it's ever too late for that. And I think that doing something, betters your life. It elongates it. It makes it worth it again. So I'm just so amazed at what WID has been able to do and what we're continuing to do. And I think you're a great part of that. Putting this together, this conversation has been amazing. I appreciate you leading me in a direction and not letting me go everywhere, which I tend to do all the time. So you've done an excellent job too. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. This is amazing. And yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch and just continuing to game plan for the future of WID with you. So
absolutely. Thank you so much.